thou that sleepest, arise from the dead.
Read the Bible, you'll find out that God's not too happy with what's going on around us.
Redeem the time, because the days are evil.
The Bible has not changed.
Boldly proclaim the restoration and preservation of Christian values in America.
Satan has brainwashed a whole nation.
As goes the church, so goes the nation.
Nobody's convicted of anything anymore.
And now, here's Last Call with your host, B.J. Edwards.
Good morning, brothers and sisters in Christ and fellow Earth travelers. Along with Mr. Anderson and Honor Mama Jeannie, you're listening to your Last Call, 2 hours of Christian talk radio with a sting. Brought to you by the Natural Family Foundation. As goes the family, so goes the nation. Our call-in number, if you wish to participate, is 614-423-4220. Our show can be accessed on the mmunited.org website if you've happened upon us by chance. I'm your host, B.J. Edwards, and this is my world.
And if it was, it'd be a lot different than what we're seeing right now. My goodness. Mr. Anderson, I know you watch the debates, and we're gonna talk about them.
I snored through the debate.
Yeah. If you had, the old saying, if you came here from another planet, where is common sense? After watching the Party of Santa Claus debate this week, I know now what it means to live in the land of the free, or at least what Democrats mean in the land of the free, or Dummycrats. Socialism on display this weekend, folks. This week. It's just incredible. We've got a great guest, investigative journalist, businessman, and economist James Simpson, who formerly served as budget examiner for the White House Office of Management and Budget. It's good that we've got him on the show today because we're going to be talking a little bit about communism, actually a lot about communism and socialism.
All those good things, huh?
Mm-hmm. Free health care, easy for me to say, free health care for our illegal alien friends. Why are they not showing pictures of starving children, 6 children around the world who need our health care and Medicare and housing benefits and food as well? That describes probably maybe 3/4 of the world.
At least.
Why aren't we seeing those? I mean, if we really cared, we're making them, some of them die. We're making them walk all the way here. When we have the capabilities of going and getting them, I think it's outrageous.
Well, yeah. And they're carrying their blow-up beds and coolers and suitcases 2,000 miles.
Medevac. We're going to medevac. Just say, don't even bother walking. We're going to come get you. And we're going to bring you here. And we're going to take care of all your needs.
I know some families in my neighborhood that could probably use that.
I heard that. So is capitalism a dirty word? That's right. Politicians who have a starting minimum wage of $173,000. Starting wage, $173,000 a year, plus COLA, cost of living, full retirement, including free health care.
Without deductibles.
And seldom denote little of it to charity, are complaining about others who are making much more than them. Socialism for Dummies today on Last Call, folks. BJ and myself, and our special guest and author Jim Palmer. I want to get into the capitalism, but there's something we need to go over first.
I got it.
Go ahead.
BJ and yourself.
I'm sorry, BJ and Mr. Anderson. We should do this. We should do this show at 1 o'clock.
I had to jump in there on that one.
No. And listen, on your way out today.
Pick up BJ's check?
Yeah, you can have both of them. You're going to have to borrow money to get a cup of coffee. No justice, no peace. I want to encourage all of you to go to the Equal Justice Tour website. I think I have that link on my Facebook page, BJ Edwards. And please help them however you can. Although their most recent project is focusing on Hillary Clinton, if we can get some traction there, who knows where will it go from there? You can make calls for the Equal Justice team and even show up and support them in person on July 6th. And by the way, we're having somebody reporting live from that location from Chappaqua next Saturday. So stay tuned. Again, Equal Justice Tour. Look them up. See how you can help them. They always use financial support, but they want people to make phone calls. And I made some phone calls this week to some congressmen. And congressmen that had talked, and even sent a resolution up to investigate Hillary, but according to the offices I spoke with, nobody knew exactly what had happened since then. And why should you even consider doing something like this? For those of you who watched the Dummycrat debates this week, the answer should be obvious. Truth has fallen in the streets. Justice and reason, as well as in America and the world, are becoming hard to find. And part of the reason is that we are now starting to redefine what right and wrong is. And in a bizarro world, wow, those definitions just become elastic, disappear. Let me give you an example or two about which I speak. And I'll start by letting our good friend Mike Huckabee help us out here. He has a newsletter that comes out on a regular basis. This week, Mike, the former governor of Arkansas, and by the way, whose daughter was the press secretary for President Trump, recently left, he made the following observations. First of all, he gives a backhanded compliment to Elizabeth Warren, who he sarcastically notes has a brilliant solution to stop illegal immigration. That solution? Just make it legal. There we are with that bizarre word, right? Well, technically, he says, it wouldn't be illegal, but it would just be a civil offense, like a traffic ticket, which would be zero deterrent. Warren said, the truth is, immigrants seeking refuge in our country aren't a threat to our national security. Y'all ought to do some research on borders and what borders, the purpose of borders are. Why do you have borders? Why do you have a door on your house? Windows? This, by the way, what Elizabeth is doing is a growing trend on the left, reducing crime stats by making crime illegal. Making crime legal. We see it in cities where leftist groups like the Justice Democrats are targeting low turnout elections, such as those for district attorneys. A far-left candidate endorsed by AOC just declared victory in Queens. In Queens, like all such candidates nationwide, she's vowing to reform, defined as simply not prosecuting a wide range of crimes. This should serve as a sobering wake-up call to voters everywhere that you can no longer take the elections for granted. If you don't want your city taken over by criminals and leftist nut jobs, think this as an overstatement. In places where such DAs have already taken office, cops, residents, business owners complain the crime is skyrocketing, as crooks realize they have been given a stay-out-of-jail free card by the prosecutors. Now remember what I just got through saying. This is bizarro world. where right is wrong and wrong is right. Or shoot, why bother at all with any social contracts, any laws? We're all going to soon be living in the ultimate in diversity. And I can tell you right now, Satan is smacking his lips. He is loving this. In the city that I'm no further than a mile away from, the local council is about to pass an ordinance that will give favor to the LGBT community. They call it equality, but that is not what they're trying to do. Think bakers. Think those that have been in business and have been attacked, pizza owners, by the gay mafia, by the homosexual hordes. This is not about equality, folks. The same thing's happening in the state of Ohio with a bill. Same thing is happening in the national government with a bill. Trojan horse. This is not about equality. It's about dominance. And the city that I was talking about admits that this will bring lawsuits. But they also know how bad today's court system is and how sleepy the populace are. No matter that young children be led astray, in many cases suffer a confused and miserable, diseased lifestyle, and sadly, many to the point that they die horrible deaths decades before their heterosexual peers if they don't commit suicide first. And please don't even try to tell me that bullying is the cause of it. Don't give me that bullying BS. Do you have any idea how much our president is bullied, lied about, shown to be a horrible example, falsely accused? By the way, that's biblical, folks. You Christian Democrats. Discriminated against. Bullying of the president. But I digress. Speaking of Christians, who is more bullied in America? Your average, everyday sexual deviant? Or a Christian white man over the age of 50? Or if it is no matter that your wife or daughter will be asked to share the bathroom with a young, intuitive male who is feeling his oats today. I'm sorry. Whoops. I mean, feeling like a woman today. Boy. No matter that businesses will be in danger of being shut down, and if you're a Christian or practice common sense, you will be attacked. This is insane, and here's just a small example. Turnstile jumping in New York, or evading paying fares on buses and trains, is one of the many crimes Queens and new DA is promising to ignore. The lax attitude was already instituted by Manhattan DA Cyrus, but who slapped Paul Manafort in solitary, and already instituted the Manhattan solitary at Rikers, with a new MTA study showing the results, a 35% jump in fare evasion in the first quarter of 2019, causing a loss to transit system of over $225 million in revenue in 2018. And this is from an article written by Mike Huckabee. Wait, so you mean that if you don't enforce laws, people commit more crimes? Really? Who could ever have seen that coming? Well, anyone other than a drooling idiot, but lucky for criminals, a lot of those are getting elected these days. What are we doing to ourselves? That's just from the justice end.
Corruption breeds corruption.
Mm-hmm. Moral relevance. I like to call it moral socialism. Everybody gets what they want when it comes to breaking the law. Officer, I'm sorry, but the devil made me do it. And the officer says, well, that's okay. That's okay. We understand. Have a nice day.
Yeah, guess who's in charge?
For sure. for sure. When we come back, we're going to talk about socialism versus capitalism. This is key. You need to have this information. Man, this is crazy. P.J. Edwards along with Mr. Anderson, your last call. The magic will continue when we come back from break.
So bye-bye, Miss American Pie. Drove my Chevy to the levee, but the levee was
Mr.
dry.
Anderson.
And them good old boys were drinking whiskey and rye.
Last call with B.J. Edwards. Real talk about real life.
In God above.
If the Bible tells you so.
Yeah, but we don't want the Bible. The Bible's too judgmental. We can't have that. And common sense looks too much like the Bible. And we're going to totally ignore nature because all that does is confirm it. So can't have any of those three. And what do you get? You get a debate on TV over who can be the most insane. Who can be the most without common sense? I hope that I have some Democratic relatives and friends listening today. Especially now because we're going to talk about capitalism and we're going to talk about socialism. And it is oil and it is water. And I asked the question earlier, is capitalism really that bad? Is it really that oppressive? If you take a look at the country in the world that practices capitalism and the rate that they encourage the practice of capitalism, would you expect to see more citizen suppression or less? Think about that in relationship to capitalism and or socialism. Would there be more goods and services, perhaps a higher quality, innovations, or would there be less of all that? If we offer free stuff for everyone and no one is required to work, how do humans react to that? Is there a human nature that responds to that? My best friend works at a homeless shelter. And they tell me how appreciative new arrivals are just to have something to eat. And then, you know what happens next? Their expectancy levels rise. They become more demanding, expecting more. And for what? All they need to do is maintain a pulse in the Bernie Sanders Claus world. The state will help with that too. And yes, there will be complaints as well. But we're doing the best we can.
That even happened in the desert when Moses was leading the people. And they complained about manna.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. They wanted quail.
Yep. Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Be careful what you ask for, by the way.
Yeah. He gave them quail.
All right. So let's just say that things are bad, as the Democrats want us to tell. You know, if you listened to the debate last night, you would think that we're in the bottoms or the throes of a depression. That people were running around the streets begging for food. No, I'm not talking about illegal aliens. I'm just talking about American citizens. So let's just say things that are bad, which they're not, but hypothetically speaking, we're going to say they're bad. Capitalism has been blamed in this fictional story. What would happen if the government were involved? You ever heard of the phrase good enough for government work? Look, for the most part, we have 535 living examples of what and how well the government does already. We don't need to ruin healthcare or our economy to find out for sure. Use common sense, folks. Did you tell your children not to work? Did you tell them not to study? Did you tell them not to try? Why do we have a border crisis? Why do we have business problems? What about our education? We can brag about that, right? Well, actually, no. I've got an article I might be able to read to you today about that. Does the government need more control over private business? For the amateur economist, which we evidently have all become, they have one magic wand that they raise every time there's an issue. And it's called taxes and legislation, or regulations, if you will. And when you tax something, what do? When you tax something? That's right. You burden it. Tax the rich, burden them. Tax businesses, burden them. Make work harder. Make it harder to be more inventive. Make it harder to hire more people. Do these millionaires build these huge swimming pool type vaults and every Saturday morning dive in, wear their sunglasses, put their suntan oil on, and just bask in the money? Is that what they do with the money? And if they like money and they want more, you know what they have to do? They have to compete with others for it. In order to compete in the capitalist society, you have to offer something, what? Better. Maybe new and improved. To me, all this is just absolutely insane. And it shows that we exhibit no common sense. And the fact that people would cheer others. I listened to the debate, and I listened to some of the comments. And I don't know whether they hire the same choir group, but you can hear a group squealing every time socialism is mentioned or something with no common sense. And it is a woman's scream, by the way. Just saying. What is America becoming? Ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, socialism, key. If you learn anything at all this morning from the program, learn this. Socialism consumes. Capitalism creates. With socialism, you have less, and with capitalism, you have more. And that's really all you need to know. When you vote for a Dummycrat, or a progressive, or a socialist Bernie Sanders, oh my goodness. You're answering the question, do I want more stuff, or do I want less quality and less stuff? And that is the question you're answering. We're going to have an economist on our show later, but please do not lose sight of this. Creates, by the way, means you have more of and better of, and socialism means you have less of and no reason to innovate. The only innovation when it comes to socialism, third key, is the inventing of segments of society that can consider themselves the newest victim class, clamoring for more government in your lives and their lives. And that is the only byproduct of socialism. Three things. Capitalism creates, socialism consumes, and socialism is only do one thing, and that's raise your expectations. They're not going to fill them, but they're certainly going to raise them. And that, go ahead.
Well, and the only way to do that is for the government to take more, because the government has nothing.
Would you quit reading off my notes?
I was looking over your shoulder there.
As Mr. Anderson just said, that occurs because the main goal of socialism, and that is complete control of power. And money is power to make decisions. For that is the first and ultimate victim, which controls goods and services no longer dependent on it, but dependent upon whoever is in power. Be it an individual or group, a dictatorship, or an oligarchy.
I was going to also say that all this free stuff they're offering, the only free thing I didn't hear them talk about was freedom.
Yep. And you're going to have less liberties, by the way. Just another byproduct.
We won't mention that, though.
Socialism consumes, capitalism creates. Do you want more or do you want less? Simple question. And if you want to have your heart broken and your expectations risen, by all means, dive into socialism. How can you be that dumb? I don't care how bad the churches are, and I don't care how bad the schools are. You don't have to be that dumb. I mean, this is common sense. I'm not going to criticize Christians for supporting the Democratic Party with regards to this issue. I'm going to talk to you as what you would consider yourself knowing, discerning individuals. Start thinking. I mean, really start thinking. Not with your heart, with your mind. And then once you get your mind working, then you can use your heart. You know, there's going to be people that have incredible amounts of wealth and power. However, there will be less innovation and less stuff overall with regards to socialism. If you want below average health care, education, already got that because the government's in control, food preparation, etc., lower quality homes, more inefficient travel, including air flight, that ought to scare you. Then by all means, find a Democrat that you like. Kamala looks really good right now, right? Oh, my. Mrs. BJ asked me last night what democratic socialism would look like and what would be the results. And I said, in essence, peanut butter is peanut butter. Socialism is socialism, regardless of the name, democratic socialism or Russian socialism or whatever. Who is conducting the communist orchestra? Bernie, Biden, Beto, whoever, whatever. There will be less stuff and, again, higher expectations. And therein lies the rub, because I just mentioned there is one other item that socialism consistently creates, which makes it so deadly, and that is the expectations. Expectations are what those subject to socialism get. And stronger socialism becomes, there is always a direct relationship to expectations. That's the formula. That's the gas the socialism runs on. Not stuff, not reality, but expectations. When these expectations are not met, and they are always so numerous and so high that they can never be met, but they intend well, right? I intended to help you out. I'm a good man. I'm Bernie. I'm going to help you out. You can't. You're helpless. You're not self-reliant. You're not an American. Americans aren't self-reliant. You need the government. what you see are laws, rules, morals, and common sense are eventually suspended. For example, Elizabeth Warren, and here trespassing tickets for illegal invaders. If you invade a home, would you expect a ticket? Oh, officer, I'm sorry. Here's a ticket. Don't ever do this again. You think they're going to show up for court? Do you think the illegal aliens are going to show up for court?
Get out of jail free card.
Mm-hmm. With the financial socialism. We're going to take a quick break. I'll cover that when we come back from break. What comes with financial socialism? Maybe before. B.J. Edwards, along with Mr. Anderson, your last call.
Stay tuned for Last Call with your host, B.J. Edwards.
Hey, we appreciate you all for taking the time to listen today. Even you, Biker Bill. That's one. And away we go. Right. Mr. Anderson, I want you to get the Chris Matthews video up or audio up for me. While he's doing that, there's something else that's happening in America that is going along almost parallel to the drive for socialism. It's what I call moral socialism. Here's some headlines. Satanist opens city council meeting. Rooftop sniper protects LGBT grooming children. Christian school raided by California government as religious freedom concerns cloud future. In England, they're handing out blunt knives because of all the stabbings that are going on. How about this? An extreme sect of vegans thinks your baby will destroy the planet. Canada court. Doctors must euthanize, abort, or refer to the government. Award-winning feminist author says parents with bad genes should be banned from reproducing. Margaret Sanger and Adolf would be proud of you, darling. Church silent when POW MIA flag at County Vietnam Veterans Memorial was replaced with an LGBT flag. This is moral socialism. Everybody's morals is the same. And socialism, please. Even the Dems in the heart of hearts know that it's not right. But in their effort to get elected and to harm Donald Trump, the further bullying Donald Trump, they have to do it. In 2016, the Debbie Wasserman Schultz, who was the head of the DNC, did an interview. And the discussion with Chris Matthews was about socialism. Mr. Anderson, if you would, please.
Sanders speak at the Democratic Convention, win or lose? Do you want to have him up there on the stage as a socialist representing the Democratic Party? Do you want him up there?
Bernie Sanders.
Do you want him on the floor of the
3 years ago. 3 years ago.
Good
Should he
Democrat,
speak?
caucuses with the Democrats. Of course he should speak.
Speak in prime time.
He should speak at the Democratic National
In prime
Convention.
time, with everybody watching.
Bernie Sanders represents we are a big tent
So the
party.
answer is yes.
I
He should
did.
speak at
I
the
said yes. I can say yes again.
But in prime time.
I don't know what time he should speak.
Oh, maybe when
certainly-
nobody's watching, you mean?
No, of course Bernie Sanders should speak. He should speak in a slot where the appeal that he has across the board, the progressive, populist message that he has that resonates deeply and widely with the American people, not just with Democrats, absolutely that should be featured. We're the difference between us and the Republicans is that we really are a Big Tent party.
Well, what is the
Republicans
difference
talk
between a
good game.
Democrat and a socialist? I used to think there was a big difference. What do you think it is?
The difference between
a Democrat like Hillary
the
Clinton
more
and a socialist like
important
Bernie
question is what's
Sanders?
the difference between being a Democrat and being a Republican?
Well, what's the bigger
In this-
difference? What's the big difference between a Democrat and a socialist? You're the chairman of the Democratic Party. Tell me the difference between you and a socialist.
The relevant debate that we'll be having over the course of this campaign is what's the difference between
Change
a
the
Democrat
subject.
and a
Change the
Republican?
subject, Chris. I can't talk about
The
this.
difference between a Democrat and Republican is that Democrats fight to make sure that everybody has an opportunity to succeed. And the Republicans are strangled by their right-wing extremists. And so we're watching them debate phasing out Medicare. And a candidate who actually said that President
Double
Obama
talk.
would march Israelis to the ovens. I mean,
Double speak.
that's the kind of debate that's going on their side. And on our side, we're talking about the best way that we can help make sure that every American has an opportunity to reach the middle class.
Yep. Called socialism. That was 3 years ago. And Chris Matthews, who's not a favorite of mine, had sense enough to ask a great question. And Debbie Wasserman Schultz, being caught in the light, scurried like a little cockroach, trying to get away from the light. And socialism happens, communism happens when socialism inevitably fails. It's just like the third stage of cancer. Fourth is coming, and it's going to kill you. Unless I have hope for America, I have hope for we the people, unless we wake up. And that's part of the purpose of the show this morning. Every Saturday morning is to wake you up. We want to educate you as to what's coming, but we want to motivate you as well. We want you to get into the game. Yeah. We want to get you in the game.
I just had to say something. I had an interesting discussion with my son last night, and I said something about his generation and the millennials. They don't know anything about socialism, so they're all for it.
But they've been in it. They've lived in it. They have lived in it, in essence, because we, as parents, have taken care of them, Mr. Anderson. Go ahead. Go ahead. A form of it.
Well, yeah, and he said, "Well, yeah, we didn't know about the Cuban Missile Crisis, or we didn't know about, some of the they hadn't experienced it from his perspective, but the idea of socialism is change. This is something better than what they think they have." But they don't know that they have the best in the world. They're completely oblivious to how other people in the world live.
Mm-hmm.
He actually surprised me because he seemed to get it, that socialism isn't going to work. It isn't a thing. But he's defending himself against my views with his Democrat friends. He called them. I got some Democrat friends. I said, most of your friends are Democrats, and he says, yeah, but
we've bred them that way. Did you know that socialism? If you're an environmentalist, you should probably not want socialism. Say what? Well, the government would have control of the environment. We could take good people that I elect. We're going to take care of it. This is from, I got this information from E. Calvin Biesner, stewards at the Cornwall Alliance. Did you know that after Germany's reunification in 1990, the West discovered that under communist rule, 42% of moving water and 24% of still waters were so polluted that they could not be used to process drinking water? Almost half of the county's lakes were considered dead or dying and unable to sustain fish or other forms of life. And only 1/3 of the industrial sewage, along with half of the domestic sewage, received treatment. This is under communism. An estimated 44% of East German forests were damaged by acid rain. Say what? Little surprise given that the country produced proportionally more sulfur dioxide than any other in the world. In some areas of East Germany, the level of air pollution was between 8 and 12 times greater than that found in West Germany. The Soviet Union's record was also horrendous. The fate of the Aral Sea, once the world's fourth largest saline lake, is one of the greatest man-made environmental disasters in history. Natural forces, volcanoes, earthquakes, tornadoes, droughts, and floods, not to mention ice ages, routinely do far greater damage than human forces. But environmentalists rarely acknowledge this, because the communist government, beginning in the 1950s, diverted vast amounts of water to the agriculture use of the two main rivers that fed it. The Aral in Russia, Aral's water level dropped by over 75 feet. It lost over 80% of its volume. Its salinity soared, devastating fish populations, and so much more. These are just two examples of the destruction of the environment by socialist countries. They not only have it compares to the historical records of environmental quality in capitalist and socialist countries, and it refutes the 5 most plausible and most common arguments eco-socialists raise against capitalism. A counterbalance story, if you will? You think? Nah. Christians are just science deniers, right? With the help of Everett Piper, I'm going to help dispel that. Global warming. Denial of facts. The National Assessment of Education Progress has issued its nation's report card in America's schools, and the data is clear. Private schools, which are mostly religious, outperform their public school counterparts in science scores in almost every subcategory, especially in physical sciences, life science, and earth science. You know those backward bulwarks of Christian knuckle-dragging science deniers? Yeah, those folks. After all, if you listen to the likes of Rob Miller, the superintendent of Bixby Public Schools in Bixby, Oklahoma, you'd never think it possible that religious schools could even teach science, much less teach it better. School choice, he says, and by inference, he implicates all private religious schools, is little more than a ruse to empower theocratic parents who want to use the Bible as a biology text. According to Mr. Miller and his cabal of establishment elites, education will be irrevocably damaged if, heaven forbid, we allow God in the classroom. Our nation's report card, however, appears to disagree with Mr. Miller. In fact, rather than confirm his bias, the actual science of the matter seems to show that Mr. Miller and other humanist bias is out to lunch. When the test results are in, it appears that it is conservatives who are actually the ones who are pro-science and not their detractors. But this should not surprise you. After all, it is conservatives who believe in the reason, rationality, and the reality of tangible, the physical, and the material. I'm going to repeat that. It is conservatives, and that's because, for the most part, we're not thinking with emotions. Who believe in reason, rationality, and the reality of tangible and the physical and the material. Today's progressives argue for the opposite. They deny science in favor of social and, yes, emotional. They ignore the empirical evidence of physics physiology, and genetics. They disregard objective data while they celebrate feelings over facts. They disparage truth while claiming it is true that nothing is true. It is conservatives who know there is a right answer and they pursue it to the logical end. They're willing to constrain themselves to live within the law of nature and nature's God. They know morality is tethered to an immutable, measured rod outside of those things measured. That's a quote from C.S. Lewis, by the way. Progressives, on the other hand, know nothing can be known. For them, there is no right answer, and that's the only right answer. For them, well, why do they have to have that? Because they could be wrong, and they can't accept that. The law is that there is no law. Everything is grounded in emotional construct driven by power, politics, and the individual passions. Morality is an illusion. To disagree with them is, well, immoral. Who are the real science deniers? B.J. Edwards along with Mr. Anderson. Going to cap off our socialism study with an article by John Stossel. B.J. Edwards along with Mr. Anderson, your last call.
Stay tuned for Last Call with your host, B.J. Edwards.
B.J. Edwards, we're back along with Mr. Anderson. We're talking about the insanity of socialism, which when it fails becomes communism, force, sickle and hammer, and trying to beat some sense into y'all, or maybe arm you for arguments. Keep in mind, socialism, communism consumes, capitalism creates. And the only thing the socialism manages to produce in large quantities is high expectations. The quality of their expectations is superb. But they can't fulfill the roles. They can't fulfill them. Presidential candidates and the media keep telling people that it's immoral that a few rich people have so much more money than everyone else. They talk as if it doesn't matter what the rich did to get the money. Instead, the fact that they are rich in itself is a sin. Unless, of course, you're a sports figure. Yaron Brook of the Ayn Rand Institute says this is lunacy. They want to condemn people that actually have moved civilization forward. He says, people who improve the standard of living for everybody on the planet. Everybody. And how's that possible? Isn't there a certain amount of stuff in the world, a certain amount of money in the world? I mean, a set amount, right? First law of thermodynamics, there's a set amount of money in the world? Nah. Isn't there a certain amount of money in the world so that when rich people grab a lot, that's less for everyone else, right? That is the rub. Because you see, wealth can be created, as we said earlier. But for thousands of years, that barely happened. We basically made about $2 a day for thousands of years. In other words, we could eat what we farmed, recounts Brooke. Then 250 years ago, something amazing happened. That amazing thing? Capitalism. Did BJ say capitalism? Oh, he said that word again. That dirty word. Oh, my apologies. For the first time, ordinary people were allowed to profit from private property. Specialization of labor created efficiency that let people produce more with less. Then they traded to get more. That created wealth. 250 years ago, we suddenly discovered the value of the individual freedom, says Brooke. The value of leaving individuals free to think, to innovate, to produce without asking for permission, without getting the state to sign off on it. And we called that the Industrial Revolution. But ever since then, politicians have complained about the profits. In the movie based on Ayn Rand's novel Atlas Shrugged, state officials demand that steel magnate Hank Rearden justify his wealth. His response? I do not owe you an answer, but I could tell you in 100 ways, he replied. Thousands of jobs, billions in revenue, fueling our economy despite your efforts. Despite your efforts. And Rearden was very right. Capitalism created and creates new wealth. We got much, much, much richer. It's hard to imagine, explains Brooke. We got electricity. Think about this. Running water. Things we all take for granted today, but we didn't have 150 years ago. And yes, some people complain about inequality, but everybody got richer. Even the poor got richer, much richer. The most capitalistic nation in the world right now is America, where the poor, comparatively speaking, live like kings and queens compared to most other nations, especially those that have not engaged in capitalism. And no, I'm not worshiping capitalism, okay? I'm just saying. Capitalism critics imply that rich industrialists took money from others as if the world's wealth is one pie. It just keeps growing and growing and growing, folks. And it doesn't happen magically. It happens as a result of man's efforts and the freedoms to do so. And that's incredibly important. The freedom to do that. Is that going to happen under communism or socialism? No. The wrong way, the right way, and the government way? Think public education, folks.
We only need one kind of peanut butter.
Mm-hmm. If Amazon founder Jeff Bezos takes a big piece, then the rest of us have less. Not so. And that's not how capitalism works. Bezos got rich by baking thousands of new pies. He created new wealth. Capitalism creates wealth because under capitalism, unlike socialism, which consumes it, we see this every time we buy something. At the coffee shop, I give a clerk $1 and they hand me coffee. Then there's a weird double thank you moment. We both say thank you. Why? Because both of us are better off. Isn't that a lot better than stealing that from hardworking, industrious folks? Maybe, yeah, they're more intelligent than we are. Maybe they inherited it, and maybe they used it to get even more money. Okay. But as a byproduct of their greed, they're creating more stuff, which we have access to. And capitalism is competitive. So it keeps the prices down, the cost down. The cost of socialism, by the way, is your freedom, your liberties. You won't have the opportunities that you have now, and you certainly won't have the freedoms. You'd be working for the man. Under capitalism, we both must like the deal, or the transaction doesn't happen. Implied here is they're going to have to do a better job. The government competing against itself, why would they have to do a better job? The clerk, in the example, wanted my $1 more than the coffee. I wanted the coffee more than the dollar. It's a win-win. Win-win. Capitalism, win-win. Socialism, lose-lose. The only way to get rich under capitalism, unless you cheat, is to serve your customer well. We live with that kind of winning every day in capitalist countries. And it's made almost everyone better off. And again, I'm not worshiping it, and capitalism isn't perfect. But boy, has it created opportunities and unimaginable luxuries. Since the Industrial Revolution, we have more than doubled our life expectancy. We have dramatically increased the quality of life, and we are wealthier than anybody could have imagined. Today's Democrat socialists say the government must aid the poor and sick because capitalists will only help themselves. The weak and the poor under capitalism have done better than in any other system. I'm still quoting Brooke. Very true. Capitalism is a fantastic system that is fundamentally moral because it allows individuals to pursue their own happiness. Your pursuit of your well-being, a virtue in and of itself, also helps the world be a better world, a better place to live. So as you're listening to those debates and you're trying to make a decision, what is best for you, what is best for your family, what is best for America, what is best for the world, keep our good friend capitalism in mind. Capitalism is not an enemy. Capitalism is a friend. Capitalism good, socialism bad. Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, here's a little audio clip before we go to break.
Okay.
Kind of what I was talking about with my son. I think this kind of cuts to the chase here. I think it'll play.
Hurrah, hooray! Oh, hooray, hurrah!
Here's a handy tip for freedom fighters. The majority doesn't win, the culture wins. Look at this. Here's a picture of the presidential election map for 1972, the election between incumbent President Richard Nixon and George McGovern. Nixon won in a tremendous landslide. He took every state except Massachusetts, and McGovern also won the District of Columbia. Nixon also took more than 60% of the popular votes, nearly 61%, a whopping 18 million more votes than the challenger. And here's a picture of some hippies the same year. There weren't really very many of these guys. Their program of sex, drugs, and rock and roll, dropping out and getting high, and some garbage about the age of Aquarius was a childish and irresponsible nonsense, almost a perfect prescription for a useless and unhappy individual life and for forcing a heretofore vibrant country into decline. As I say, there weren't a lot of them, but ask yourself this. Who won over time? The majority that elected Nixon or the tiny minority that believed in promiscuous sex, legalized marijuana, socialism, foul language, and disrespect for our traditions and founding principles? Even we, the conservatives I'm talking to and the conservative who's talking, are in some ways more children of the hippies than of the people who voted for Richard Nixon. Polls mean nothing. Majorities mean nothing. Facts and logic, morality mean very little. Culture means everything. Culture is that mysterious intellectual atmosphere we don't even know we're breathing. Today, the philosophical descendants of the 60s, radicals, are selling a psychopathic culture of death and pseudo-virtuous dishonesty. And if you think the polls and the majority and the facts are on our side, just remember, majorities don't win. Culture wins. And we're going to...
Culture wins, huh?
Well, what do you think of that?
Makes a lot of sense. Makes a lot of sense.
Well,
go ahead.
We're just trying to wake up to what is going on. You got a stage of 10, 20 candidates for Democrat
president.
Yeah, and my only thought is, well, not my only thought, but my one thought about that was, Well, if they didn't have 20 candidates, they wouldn't have had very many people attending, because there had to be somebody behind each one of them.
True.
If they only had 2 on there, they probably would have had an audience of 20.
I get that. Hey, we're going to have to take a hard break here in about 10 seconds. This is B.J. Edwards along with Mr. Anderson. This is your last call. When we come back, we're hopefully going to have Jim Simpson, our special guest, and the Red Green Axis, author of that book. But he's also got a lot to say about economics. Looking forward to hearing from Jim shortly.
I got to find something to play here.
Well,
I got it.
Seems like we've lost our way. Where did we go astray? The lies that we've been told have put our dreams on hold. And you know, if we don't watch out, we could all go under and drown. Yeah, the future depends.
Keeping you informed. This is Last Call with B.J. Edwards.
B.J. Edwards along with Mr. Anderson, your last call. J.B. Williams, this is what scares me more than anything else. There's that call. J.B. talks about how the left plans to win total D.C. power in 2020. A massive influx of undocumented citizens, illegal aliens, strategic use of dead and repeat voters in Dem districts, redistricting key states or blocking proper redistricting by the GOP, changing key state electoral colleges to winner-takes-all, delaying the military vote, using the DMV to issue state IDs, using the mass media to drive Trump support down, use 24 DNC candidates to gain broad voter approval, file lawsuits in very close districts, use more than $1 billion in global funds to outspend the GOP across the board, control the count. Trump should have a 2-1 massive landslide win, but we'll see what happens. We have on the phone with us Jim Simpson. Hang on a second here. All righty, there it is. Jim's an investigative journalist, businessman, and former economist and budget examiner for the White House Office of Management and Budget, OMB, under Presidents Reagan, Bush, and Clinton. Since 1995, he has written nonfiction articles for various periodicals based both on the experiences in government and business and a long-standing avocation in public policy. Mr. Simpson is an expert on immigration and refugee settlement, and we're going to talk a little bit about that today. His most recent book is The Red Green Axis, Refugees, Immigration, and Agenda to the Erase America, a top-selling monograph for over 2 years. Monograph, going to have to ask Jim what that is. Welcome to Last Call, Jim.
Hey. Great to be with you, BJ.
Hey, what's a monograph?
It's a short book.
Okay.
And actually, my latest book is The Red Green Axis 2.0, subtitled An Existential Threat to America and the World. I have to update my bio
okay.
to include that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Hey, do you prefer Jim or James?
Jim.
Okay, Jim. We've been talking all morning about capitalism and how there's a want to hate it these days by politicians who want to use it to get elected. And I compared capitalism to socialism, and I said with capitalism is a wealth creator, socialism is a wealth consumer, and with socialism, the only thing that you get that a rise of is expectations. And because those expectations are never met, you eventually end up in communism. Socialism is bad. Have you studied any kind of capitalism or economies in your lifetime, Jim?
Well, I got my degree in economics and actually taught for a short while economics at the University of Delaware. Yeah, I mean, that, in fact, drove my entire interest in the subject. And I've studied communism, communist systems, and strategies for 30 years. And it is what drove me to become a writer, an author, and a speaker about this, because this is an existential threat to our country. The red-green axis, which I talk about in my 2 books, is just one of the fronts that the communists are using to overthrow our nation. And you can't use words too strong, because that's really what's happening. It's a asymmetrical military strategy of conquest of the United States that's been conducted through our various levers of culture, Hollywood, the media, the schools, and in both military and economic policy as well. It's a constant attack. And the thing about socialism that makes it so pernicious is that while it claims a fantasy utopia of unselfish people working for the greater good, while at the same time using people's basest instincts to make socialism look attractive.
Emotions.
They use both their people's greed, because obviously socialism's biggest attraction is that it promises something for nothing. And it can't deliver on that promise. It is impossible for it to deliver on that promise. But that's what it promises. And people are willing to delude themselves to believe it out of their own personal desire to have a better life and a better, be able to afford more things without actually having to earn it themselves.
Jim?
So it works. Yeah, I'm sorry.
Jim, that's fine. That's fine. I just want to make a note. It sounds too good to be true, and that's why it is. It sounds too good to be true. You mentioned the red-green axis, and before we go any further, maybe I need to back up here a little bit and explain what you mean by red-green axis.
Sure. Okay. The red-green axis is the alliance between the radical left in this country and actually internationally, and the Islamic movement. The two are working together, and actually most people don't know have been working together almost since the Soviet Union came to pass in 1917. Lenin was one of the first people to discover the potential of using the huge Muslim community as a way to advance communism. So he early on cultivated, as they say, Muslims of communist origin and turned them into communists of Muslim origin. And that's what we are facing today. We have communists of Muslim origin. For example, Nihad Awad is the leader of the Council on American Islamic Relations. And he is professes to be a devout Muslim. But his real entree into this entire business was as a leader in the Students for Palestine in America, which was a subsidiary of the Palestine Liberation Organization, which is a KGB creation. And if you know communism as I know it, they never put anybody in charge that isn't already a committed communist. The communists just will not do it. So as a young man, Nihad Awad was a student leader of the PLO, a communist. And then in 1994, he curiously switched and suddenly became interested in the Palestinian Muslim terrorist group, Hamas. which is a Muslim Brotherhood front. And he professed his support for Hamas in a public video at a public forum at a college in Florida in 1994, and you can find that video on the web. He says, "Today I support Hamas," and he became the leader of the Hamas front group in America, known as the Council on American Islamic Relations. And CARE works with the Black Lives Matter group, which is a Maoist organization, the Freedom Road Socialist Organization. That's where all of the founders come from. The Maoist organization, it doesn't talk about helping blacks. It talks about overthrowing capitalism. People just miss all these messages. And CARE works with so many other leftist groups, and many seemingly at odds with what Muslims believe. You know, the gay rights whole agenda, and all these other groups that CARE works with, that just seem completely out of sync with what Muslims claim to believe. So you have to ask yourself what's really going on there. But it is the alliance between these Muslim activist groups, primarily the Muslim Brotherhood, and the American Communist Movement, which we refer to, as the far left, the progressive left, the progressives, the liberals, the Democrats, whatever. They're all communists.
Can you think of anybody, past or present, individual-wise, that would fall into the category of as a communist Muslim, perhaps somebody that's worked for our government, maybe in the a former administration or current administration?
Well, it's hard to say. I believe that that's the case with Nihad Awad. Notice Rashida Tlaib and Ilhan Omar, both newly elected representatives, both members of Democratic Socialists of America, which is not a democratic socialist group. It's a Trotskyite group. They are not democratic socialists. You know, the left constantly misdirects and misinforms by manipulating and misusing language to deceive people. Democratic Socialists of America is a communist group. These two women are both members, and they spout all the far left agendas and dog whistles. At the same time, spouting, Islamic, the most extreme Islamic sorts of statements. And Linda Sarsour is another one like that. But here's something that most of your listeners probably don't know. Ali Khamenei, the current leader of Iran, the current mullah in charge of Iran, who took over after Khomeini died, he got his training at Moscow University. And as with everything else, the communists don't allow just anybody to come to Moscow University, because at Moscow University, you get trained in communist subversion tactics. You become introduced to and trained in the methodologies and the agendas being pursued by the world communist movement. And that hasn't changed despite the so-called fall of the Soviet Union. Still the same.
We're on the phone with Jim Simpson, author of The Red Green Axis, investigative reporter. And Mr. Simpson's done some groundbreaking work on the Cloward-Piven manufactured crisis strategy introduced to the world, to the diabolical method former Obama White House chief staff Rahm Emanuel referred to when he said, "Never let a good crisis go to waste." His research formed the basis for Glenn Beck's series of shows on that issue. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, you mentioned Russians So, did they influence the election, Jim? Is that why we got Donald Trump? B.J. Edwards along with Mr. Anderson will be back in about 30 seconds, James. Hang on.
Keeping you informed. This is Last Call with B.J. Edwards.
And we are back. This is B.J. Edwards along with Mr. Anderson, our special guest, Jim Simpson. Jim has been in and out of a lot of situations that are very unique, very interesting. Jim is author of several books. Where did I put those? Okay, I already mentioned the Red Green Axis. The Patriots Handbook, Casa de Maryland. That's an interesting title. Maybe you want to talk about that. And Red Unions, the Red Green Axis, Jim Simpson. So, was there Russian influence in the election? And is that why we got Donald Trump? And that's why we're in so much trouble? Why our nation is just falling apart? Is that it?
Well, there actually was Russian influence in the election. Mm-hmm. The Democrats used it to create a phony dossier to attempt to indict President Trump. And I don't know how and why that always gets overlooked. It cracks me up because, people have known or believed that from the beginning. And I'll tell you honestly, Christopher Steele claims he got a lot of his information for the dossier from the Russians, from his intelligence contacts. But we don't even know that that's true. In his book, Dan Bongino says that the entire dossier narrative was actually made up by Glenn Simpson of Fusion GPS, and he wrote something almost identical to it in 2007 using different names. And so, but if there is any Russian collusion, it is and always has been with the Democrats. Donald Trump is the last person Vladimir Putin would want elected president because he understands he's a hard-nosed negotiator and he doesn't take guff from people. Hillary has bent over numerous times as Secretary of State. She's about as easily corruptible as, street corner guy playing three-card Monte. She's useless. And they know that they can game her anytime they want and roll her because actually she is part of that entire network. She was raised on radical politics. Her first job out of college was working for as an intern for Robert Truhaft. And Robert Truhaft was the chief lawyer of the California Communist Party. And as I say and said before, communists never hire non-communists. You need people who are trustworthy, people who will agree with you and do what you say because it's too risky, because their whole agenda, all their activities are either borderline legal or even criminal, and they're very subversive, and they will not allow people into their inner circle, even as an intern, without already having them vetted. And she's worked with communists and hard leftists her entire life. And as Secretary of State, she proved how willing she was to do this. The email situation, open access to foreign intelligence agents.
Incredible.
This was the Russian collusion. And it's astounding to me that isn't the focus. I mean, even once you get, and I don't want to, talk down Devin Nunes or the people in the House who aggressively went after this Trump-Russia investigation and unearthed all kinds of interesting information about it, proving what a fraud it was. But nobody really went after the email investigation, which is the massive pink elephant in the middle of the tent. You know, I mean, it's just sitting there, and it's so obvious, but it's like they don't want to touch it. The Senate didn't go anywhere near that. It's a national disgrace. She broke actual, real laws, felonies, and she should be behind bars today. If anybody else had done that, there'd be no question about it.
Comey admitted that. Comey admitted that a couple years ago that she did. By the way, this isn't done yet. There's a group of very involved Americans, grassroots, that is going to be in front of Hillary Clinton's house next Saturday. I think July 6th, next Saturday, and they are clamoring for equal justice. And they are contacting congressmen, the ones that signed the this is. I'll send you a link to who they are, and if any way you think you can help them, James, please, I'd highly recommend doing that. But they're going out there. They're contacting congressmen. They're trying to get a hold of the news media to catch fire to this. But they're not done with this. They are not done with this. Yeah. They want equal justice under the law. So I thought make you aware of that.
Yeah, well, I'm hoping that Barr will pick up that that baton, because it's almost a perennial reaction when Democrats or the left accuse Republicans of doing anything. They go on the defense, and their response is, no, we haven't, or no, we didn't, and here's the proof. But it's a defensive response. Instead, they shouldn't even be attempting to defend what is an absurd, hypothesis from the beginning, and instead just go straight forward and say, wait a minute, the Russian collusion was between Hillary Clinton, her campaign, and the Russians, and we need to investigate that and prosecute her for her crimes. And just blow on past the whole Trump-Russia investigation, because that was just a complete deliberate misdirection to save the Democrats from the clear illegal activity that they engaged in.
But it's also very...
And they've been working with the Russians for decades. Bill Clinton released millions of classified documents. He declassified millions of documents that the CIA arduously fought against and begged him not to do, and he just let it all go. And these are and then of course he sold missile miniaturization technology to the communist Chinese. These people have been involved with our enemies for decades. And you asked earlier about other people. You know, Teddy Kennedy had a back channel communications vehicle with the Soviet KGB as far back as the 1970s. And it was, in fact, Teddy Kennedy's interference in the writing of the FISA law that made it illegal to surveil American citizens unless they were directly engaged in terrorist activity, like if they were planning a bombing or something. And he deliberately changed that law to protect himself because he was doing just that. He was communicating regularly with the KGB on how to subvert our foreign policy that opposed them. It's just flat out treason. And he even did that more aggressively with the Soviets during Reagan's tenure. So this is nothing new for the Democrats. They really, I believe that they have by and large been captured and taken over by the Communist Party.
Other than lying, Democrats, progressives, liberals, socialists are very good at projecting. And whatever they're telling you about...
Yes, is what they're doing.
Yeah, exactly what they're doing. And please note that, because they're telling you, they're confessing. They're confessing backdoor, but they're confessing to what exactly is that they're doing. And you see they do that every year, every week. It's incredible.
All the time. Yeah, every day. Everything they say accuse Republicans of doing is exactly what they're doing. I've never understood the GOP's flailing inability to respond to that.
Jim, I think part of that is, and we're talking with investigative journalist Jim Simpson. He's featured in the documentaries The Enemy Within, Agenda, Grinding America Down, Agenda 2, Master of Deceit, and most recently Sabotage, how the Islamist Marxists and their useful idiots are destroying America from within. Jim, we have an issue in America, and it's part of what we do with our mission here, is try to affect public opinion. What we're up against is politicians, and right now the Democrats have the House. So all they're doing is running for the election in 2020. That's all they're doing. They're doing nothing productive.
That's all they're doing. Nothing.
And then you have the news media, which is either causing this or at the very least helping it along. So they're controlling public opinion. Your leaders are your public schools, educational institutions are driving kids towards it. The church, for the most part, remains silent, and the families no longer have leadership. So given all of that, I mean, we're talking about, we're in a public opinion war. Whoever wins that war, today's public opinions are tomorrow's laws are the next generation's morals. Whoever wins that war wins the day. How? And I know you're educating, Jim, and I know that's very important. But how do we get, other than this program and programs like it and some of the other places that you go to, we're very limited. And even with Google and Facebook, the way they control the information, how do we win this war, Jim?
Well, I get asked the question all the time, what can we do? What can we do? Well, my answer is, you know what you can do, frankly. But what you want me to say is you can press this button and fix it, or you can press that button and fix it, or you can make this phone call or elect this person. Everybody wants a magic pill. There's no magic pill. We are in the fight for our lives, and it's high time we start recognizing it. You know, I was in a conference call with some pastors a week or so ago. They informed me that there are 40 million Christians who are not voting. Mm-hmm. 40 million. That is inexcusable. That is inexcusable. And I don't care. I'm a Christian, but I don't care if you think that, we're in this world, but we're not of this world, so we don't really concern ourselves with that. You know, Jesus will save us, and, you know, we're looking forward to the next life. This one's lost, you know. And that's just a lazy excuse for staying on the couch watching TV. It's really not a reason, because we were all put here on earth to be of service to our fellows. And if we are allowing evil to rule here, if we are doing nothing, not lifting a finger to stop the evil that is growing like a metastasized cancer on our society, and we're not being Christians. We're not being true to our faith. There's 40 million out there. Every one of them needs to get. 15 million of those aren't even registered. They all need to get up, register, vote, urge their family members, urge their friends to vote. That's what every one of us has to do. The victory is within our grasp. And then once we have, you know, for example, in the next election, we get the right people elected, that doesn't end it. That just begins it.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Agreed.
That just begins it. You know, when I work for, a lot of times I get paid by contract for tax-exempt organizations who rely on donors, you know, from individuals. And following the election of Donald Trump, in 2016, I lost my contract. Many of these nonprofits lost their contracts. Why? Because all of the donor class declared themselves victors and went home.
We've done our job. It's over with. Boy,
it's over with.
Do I ever get that? And I want to talk to you about the church a little bit. We're going to have to take another quick break, Jim. But when we come back, I do want to talk about the church, but I also want to talk about public participation. And I agree with you. We need to get out of the stands, whether you're Christian or not. You need to get out of the stands if you're conservative and get into the game. B.J. Edwards, along with Mr. Anderson, we're speaking with Jim Simpson. This is Last Call. You can reach us on mmunited.org. Going to that website, it's right there. Call-in number 641-741-0816 if you just want to listen. And if you want to talk, 614-423-4220. We'll be back. This is your last call.
Last Call with BJ Edwards. Real talk about real life.
And we are back. BJ Edwards, along with Mr. Anderson, our special guest, Jim Simpson, the author of The Red-Green Axis, talks about a collusion between the Democratic Party, American Communists, Socialists, and other brands of progressives, i.e. the red and the forces of Islamic Jihad. The green, so named because the color green carries much symbolism in Islam, and most Muslim nations feature green in their flags, emblems, and other identifiers. Its collective goal is to alter and undermine our national character, traditions, and laws so much that it can overthrow our constitutional form of republic without firing a shot. And we can talk a little bit more about that. But we got on the subject of the church, and I got to tell you, Jim, I think I might have mentioned it before, but for several years, we stood in front, or we were after the church to get engaged in the culture, after pastors to engage in the culture. And it was, we actually stood in front of a mega church here in Columbus, Ohio for 9 months, and they finally took us to court and got a restraining order. So that's been my experience with churches. But yes, they can be the pulpit can be so powerful, but it doesn't exist. It just doesn't exist. And that's been one of the problems. And also the family, and we could talk a little bit about that, but the family doesn't. Families are designed to teach authority, and they're designed to teach morals. And when we take a look at our current millennials, whatever generation it is now, they've come to become their own gods. They don't respect authority. They think it's all about them. So let's talk about the church, Jim. How do you talk to some pastors? Good for you. How do you get them motivated, not just the talk stage, but what do we need to do next as pastors? And by the way, there's some good pastors that we've run across recently who have actually stepped into the arena, which is fascinating for me. Fascinating. Go ahead, Jim, please.
Well, pastors are people like everybody else, and like everybody else, most people prefer to shy away from confrontation, prefer to avoid controversial subjects. Now, the left doesn't have a problem with it. There's always the worry about the 501s, the nonprofit status of the church. And so I think conservative pastors, or at least pastors who are not leftists, are hypersensitive about the possibility that they could lose their tax-exempt status if they start talking politics. Whereas on the left, you saw, the Obamas go and visit churches and preach and, give speeches in churches, and unapologetic support from pastors. So the left has no problem doing this. But the right has a problem because there are so many people on our side of the fence, as it were, that really shy away at the name-calling, the constant vilification and name-calling that the left engages in anytime anybody steps forward or sticks their neck out. So, we're essentially stuck when it comes to pastors like that, especially those in the mega churches, because they've got a big franchise going, don't they? They make a lot of money doing that. And so suddenly they come in and start saying controversial things like Rick Warren is all in favor of the interfaith dialogue. He's in favor of promoting this idea of Chrislam. I mean, this stuff is heretical. And there are many pastors that are willing to engage in that, and the Muslims are increasingly targeting evangelical ministers because they know that's where the strength is in the Christian church, and they want to subvert it and undermine it as much as they can. So, and so many of these pastors are being, cultivated with flattery, and I think a lot of them are being cultivated with the promise of, increased donations in their coffers or some other kind of financial incentive. And the Bible predicted it. There's going to be corruption in the church. There always has been, but I think it's growing. And the only way, there's always going to be pastors as well who are brave, who are honest, who are devout, and understand what that means and are willing to take a stand. But they are and have always been in a minority, just like people like that in the Republican Party are a minority. But we have to elevate those people. We have to support those people with everything we do and say. And then I don't look so much towards the leaders of the churches to bail us out as the people who call themselves Christians who really aren't doing anything right now.
How about some fathers? How about some fathers in the family stepping up to the plate?
Fathers in the family, yes. People just stepping up to the plate. And the thing is, so much of this doesn't happen because we're an affluent nation and because we can still have our backyard barbecues and watch the game on Sunday. We're not starving in the streets. We're not facing what the Ukraine faced in the 1930s when Stalin collectivized the farms. We're not facing the Red Terror, which was instituted by Felix Dzerzhinsky under Vladimir Lenin, whose purpose was to deliberately terrorize the entire population so that they would not even attempt to object to all the monstrous things that the communists were doing in that country. And that blueprint is followed in every single country taken over by the communists. And it will happen here if they are allowed to win. We need to come to grips with that. We need to, one thing that you and I do, and I think others in our media do, is can raise the temperature and get people to see that this is existential right now, that even though I can still cook a steak tonight for dinner and sit down and watch my favorite TV show, the possibility that will all be taken away from me, along with every one of my personal belongings, every bit of my freedom, could be gone within 2 years. It really raises the temperature and forces me to try to reprioritize my time and see what I can do to help out. Now, this is my full-time business, so that's what I do full-time. But, other people who might be otherwise inclined to just take a pass could spend 5 or 10 minutes making phone calls, could spend a little bit of time perhaps seeing about volunteering for an upcoming candidate. Just little changes here and there that help you and force you to put skin in the game, because you have skin in the game whether you know it or not.
Yeah. It's right now. It appears to be an away game, but we don't want to wait till it becomes a home game, which we're doing.
That's right.
Okay. That's what we're doing. Before what contact information can we give to our listeners today? Maybe you have maybe you want somebody to buy one. I doubt it, but maybe you want somebody to buy one of your books or something like that.
Nah. You can go to crisisnow.net. That is, it's not really a website. It's just a single page that has links to the archives of most of my articles. I also publish at the Federalist and some at Daily Caller. A lot of different websites have my articles. Most of them are referenced, though, on that crisisnow.net website. Okay. You go to the Center for Security Policy. They also have a lot of my stuff and a lot of my colleagues' things. It's a very good website to read. Go to Amazon.com and order the Red Green Axis 2.0. I strongly recommend that because it essentially covers almost every aspect of this issue, and it will really enlighten you to the many ways that the left has been subverting our nation and what needs to be done to stop it.
Crisisnow.net?
Crisisnow.net. www.crisisnow.net.
Most of our folks have been public educated. Could you spell crisis for us?
CRISIS. Now. NOW. .net.
N-E-T. I'm sorry. I'm just.
Come on, BJ.
I got to be ornery.
You're pulling my leg here.
Yes, sir. Hey, our research
products of the public school.
Yeah, our research staff ran across something I thought would be of interest to you. I don't know whether you're aware of this or not, but evidently China is facing a growing criticism over the persecution. Now, China is communist, over the persecution of some Muslim minority groups.
Yeah.
What is that all about?
Well, I haven't followed that closely.
Okay.
It's probably the Uyghurs and or Uyghurs. I forget how they pronounce it.
Uyghurs, yeah, U-I-G-H-U-R, and that.
Yeah. And communists oppress everyone.
Mm-hmm.
Muslims don't get a pass. And the thing about it is, though, it's kind of like the blacks in this country who vigorously protest, slavery in the United States, but somehow manage to overlook and don't criticize, don't even mention, don't protest, and don't even care about the massive human trafficking that's being engaged in by Muslim countries around the globe. We're talking about modern-day slavery. A lot of it is sex slavery, but it's modern-day slavery of the most horrific kind. And they don't raise a finger to talk about that. All they talk about is how bad the white man was 2 centuries ago to oppress the blacks and enslave them. And, it was a bad situation, but it was our founding principles that guaranteed that it would not last. It was our founding principles. The same founding principles those same people are trying to destroy are what guaranteed that slavery could not last in this country and ultimately did not last. And it was the most it was the most deadly conflict the United States has ever been involved in, with over 600,000 killed. So, we corrected our path. Their whole gig is, this is just another Democrat 2020 talking point, reparations. You remember Henry Gates, the college professor from Harvard, who got into it with a policeman, and Obama had him and the policeman down and had tea at the White House. Do you remember that?
Yes.
Well, Henry Gates, you can look him up online. He has talks an article about how many slaves were brought to the United States. Do you know how many slaves were brought to the United States through the entire period of our slavery?
Good question. No, I don't.
It was just a little over 300,000.
Okay, that sounds like a lot, Jim.
Do you know how many whites were enslaved by Muslims during the period of the Barbary pirates? Over 1 million. We want our reparations.
Yeah. Yeah, that's
I want my reparations. My ancestors were enslaved by the Barbary pirates. I want my reparations. The whole thing is absurd. Slavery is as old as the world, and that doesn't excuse it, doesn't make it okay. But for the left to carve out this little niche and whine about it while there is slavery ongoing today that they could care less about, it's fraudulent. It's hypocritical to the point of total fraud. And this is the same situation going on with the Uyghurs in China. Muslims here could care less about what's going on with their quote-unquote Muslim brethren in China, because it's something they can't affect. They know that the Chinese communists are not going to be dissuaded from whatever they're doing without a shooting war to stop them, and they're not about to get involved in that. But furthermore, more importantly, all they care about is what's going on here, because that's the only thing that affects them, and all they care about are themselves.
Amen to that. And boy, you're missing one other good point. They're very arrogant. Only they can end this. Only give them the power, and they'll end it. Jim, we're going to have to go. I appreciate you taking the time with us today. Jim Simpson, crisisnow.net, and that's spelled CRISISNOW.net. And we're going to have you back on again, and we'll go a little deeper into this. And get the book, Red Green Axis. Jim, I thank you for your time, brother, and your efforts.
Thank you very much, BJ. Great to be with you. Hope you all enjoyed the talk.
We did, sir. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Always a pleasure to run into those folks that have been out there. Jim didn't get into this yesterday. And he didn't get into it by accident, by the way, but that's another story. But to have somebody with that kind of experience and to be able to share that knowledge with us. And one of the points I want to make is what he said is we need to recognize that there definitely is an issue now. It's there. We can't escape it. And like I said, don't wait till it becomes a home game, because then it's going to get really personal, and that changes everything. B.J. Edwards along with Mr. Anderson. When we come back, we're going to talk a little bit about the family. Yeah, can't get by on a Saturday without it. Hang in there.
Stay tuned for Last Call with your host, B.J. Edwards.
I love our fan base, especially the Biker Bill. Got a great sense of humor, young man. And I can call you a young man. Well, let's review a little bit. Capitalism, good. Socialism, bad news. It stands to reason. It defies nature. It defies human nature to think that you can promise people the world and give them a fishbowl. They're not going to be happy. They're not going to be satisfied because you've already raised their expectations. And while you're doing it, you've taken away what they had to begin with, and that keeps reducing and reducing and reducing until you do have physical confrontations. Look what's happening in Venezuela. We haven't heard a lot about Venezuela recently, have we? What's going on? Can you imagine being a Venezuelan and going through the havoc that they're going through today? They're back to the basic Maslow needs of food and shelter, folks. And if necessary, our Creator would be more than happy, I don't think it'd be happy, but more than willing to show us that door if we keep up with this insanity. And yes, Christians, you should know better. If you are a Christian and you have the Holy Spirit in you, then you know the truth. You see nature like nobody else. You see it for what it is. You have common sense. You know to do good, yet you don't do it. Silence in the face of evil is evil itself. God will not hold you guiltless. Not to speak is to speak. Not to act is to act. What say you? This is not going away. Go to a gay pride parade. Every year, there's more of them, and there's more of them in the parade. And they get bolder. They've been encouraged. Your local civic organizations, your tea parties, whatever. If you don't want to do it alone, try to join up with them. Affect them in what they're doing. It gets back to that grassroots theory, right? But of the grassroots theory, there is one, in our humble opinion, that is much more critical in this role than any other. The one that we've neglected. The one that men haven't taken the leadership of. The natural family. Strong families make strong people, and strong people make strong nations. That's a fact. That's a fact. Do you want to go into battle with weaklings? With the Kamala Harrises of the world that get offended? That was harmful. Oh, really? Strong families. We need to get back to the male side of this nation, by the way. The natural family is the cornerstone of all civilizations. Societies must do all they can to maintain, nurture, promote, and protect the critical family unit. Yet we're doing everything but that in the USA today. Everything out there is attacking it. We've got no-fault divorce, pornography, all this being provided more and more. We have gay marriage. We have gays adopting children. The moral fabric of a society is obliged to protect this family representation. And virtuous social contracts act like constraints surrounding and providing for its support. Contracts are laws, they're ordinances, but sometimes they don't even have to be officially on the books. You could open the door for a lady, men, or treat them like a human being, right? There's no law in the book that says you have to, but there are social contracts, expectations, if you will. Those expectations need to favor the natural family. One man, one woman, lifelong, committed, monogamous relationship with their biological and or adopted children. Key. That's what makes for strong families, strong individuals. And no, nobody's perfect. But if you want to give somebody a chance in life, go to the family first. Start making your corrections there. For society to survive, the fabric, the moral fabric, must be mended by readjusting the social constraints, the contracts, public opinion, if you will. We talked about that earlier. To once again favor the age-old natural family prototype. A prototype that the Lord built and really needs no improvement. Just needs to be followed naturally. What about institutions, society? They should be obligated to acknowledge the validity and legality of original natural family models and build their institutional foundations upon and around it. The areas of influence. We mentioned education this morning, business, government, news media, entertainment, churches. They can prop up the family. They can make sure that it is as natural as it should be. This means that the business community, news media, educational providers, entertainment, government, and the church should all do whatever is necessary to support the natural family as if their organizational lives depended on it, because, folks, they do. This is family intensive. It is the foundation. Within the family, there must be a clear leader, and that leader must be a male. Father, grandfather, uncle, male elder cousin. There's somebody in the family. And that leader must come from the family's lineage. Leadership should not come from the church, the state, or any of the other key influences I mentioned earlier in a society. The stability of the family rests on the extent to which the family leadership is able to keep itself from being threatened or co-opted from outside influences that are not fully supportive of the natural family. When traditional roles within the family become challenged, are made unclear or altered, hello to 21st century America, a hostile environment is created that threatens the strength and viability of the family. When you see the attacks on Christian males, especially the white male, but in this case it doesn't really matter, black, white, whatever. When you see the attack on the male, when you see the feminization of this nation, know, America, that that's a warning sign. That you need that male leadership. Yeah, I hear you out there. Go ahead. I don't care. You've got three aspects to the family. You've got the structure, you've got the content, and you've got the role of the family in society. And the structure is being attacked like it was in Rome. The content, the same. And the role of the family, and I liken this to the tail wagging the dog. The family should be the one that is controlling the other areas of influence, and that includes the church, folks. Regardless of what you think about the church or education or the government, just get the right person in office, right? That's all you need to do. Just get the right person in office. It doesn't work that way. Some of that's because of the aforementioned public opinion. It just doesn't work that way. It's got to be right in all three areas, and the family has to be the primary concern. And when it goes bye-bye, the nations go bye-bye. History shows you that. Modern-day sociologists will tell you that. And if you need more proof, like I always say, go to the prison systems, interview some of their residents there, talk to them about their family life. The key role of any good society is to develop and maintain laws with a foundation rooted in the morally strong value system that has the natural family benefits as its primary purpose for existing. Ladies and gentlemen, we need help. We're over the target. We have, I think, made the better mousetrap. But we need help in getting the word out. I'd love to find a spokesman or two of national prominence that would take on our cause. Once that happens, it would be a game changer. Not just for us, but for this nation. And I don't know about you, but I think it's about time for a change. Things are not looking good, but it may be the enemy knowing that they're backed up against the wall and this is their last hurrah. I hope that's where we're at. I see promising things happening, especially when it comes to the church. But I do know that at the end of the day, if the family is not being taken care of, if it's broken, we won't have a nation. We won't have liberty. We won't have freedom. And we're likely to be staring down the barrel of the gun of our best friend or maybe even one of our children. This is B.J. Edwards along with Mr. Anderson. It's been your last call. We thank you for listening in today. I want to end on a positive note. There is hope. It is in the family. Do whatever you can to support that, personally and corporately. This has been your last call.
Thank you for tuning in to another edition of Last Call with B.J. Edwards.